let's start with Anula, followed by Luke, and then I'll provide more introduction on myself. So, Anula, it is a pleasure to be part of this conversation with you. Funding is key to building any company. And so it's been very instructive to explore what options are available to seed and support companies that are researching and developing medical products to address women's health. So why don't we start off with your background?
So you've already heard this. I started life as a physician. I did a combined MD, PhD, and thought I was going to be an academic, and never batted an eyelid when I was presented with the 70-kilogram white male as the iconic patient. And it was only about 15 years ago, years later, that I won't take you through the long story, but I suddenly sort of woke up and began reading and talking to people, and I was completely shocked, then furious, then energized, and now happy. So that's sort of my background. I'd been a VC for a long time. I started out being a general life science investor, and then since 2013, I've been investing formally in women's health.
Fascinating. And Luke?
Yeah, so Luke Larsen, I'm a vice president with MedVenture Health. We're based right here in Salt Lake City. We're a multifamily office. I actually have kind of an interesting career path. My first job out of college was with Ford Motor Company in market research and corporate strategy role, and then I moved on to work for Koch Industries for a few years, which is a conglomerate, but primarily in oil and gas, in similar corporate strategy and corporate finance roles. Always had an interest in getting to medical-focused industry, specifically medical device, and so was looking for opportunities in that space and found my way to MedVenture about 5 years ago, and have been investing with MedVenture specifically in medical devices and associated services now for 5 years.
That's great. Okay. So let's delve into investing. Where do you see the biggest financial opportunities in investing in women's health right now? And this time I'll start with you, Luke.
Yeah, sure. So if we kind of look at the history of investing in women's health, about 1/3 of all companies in women's health right now are focused on reproductive health and sexual health. And so if we think about what has a track record, that's really where all of the investment has been, where the successes have been. There's a ton of opportunity now that we're starting to see focused on menopause. There's a ton of opportunity we're starting to see focused on mental health and hormonal health. You're probably familiar with some of the apps or a lot of AI that they're starting to use for some of those things. Maybe more specific to MedVenture of areas where we're interested, and this goes, we've heard quite a bit about the government funding that has come up recently, specific to women's health, and that is giving us more opportunities for good data, specifically around women's health, on the devices side, and that's where MedVenture is really interested in investing. And so I think we'll talk in a little bit about some of the investments MedVenture has done in women's health specifically, but that's really where we have interest, is in the devices and the diagnostic side of things, and I really see a lot of opportunity there coming up in the near term because of the level of investment we're getting from the government and actually getting better data, more clinical trials, and some of those things that we really need as investors to pitch to our investment committees about why these would be good investments.
Okay, great.
So I agree with you. And so in constructing our portfolio, we are pulling in the traditional reproductive area for the reasons Luke said, which is that's where there's a science as well as the acquirers and the track record. However, we're also searching a great deal for the non-traditional areas, and we have found some. They are in some ways riskier because we don't know what the path would be, but I think it is very important that somebody take that step. And so we're doing an amalgamated portfolio to balance the risk.
Okay. What do you think is an undervalued, you might have just touched on that a little bit, but an undervalued opportunity that maybe investors aren't looking at but could result in huge profits, huge ROI? So we'll start with you this time.
So I think it is all those other areas.
Yeah.
Because they are much larger. They are common chronic diseases, and the opportunities are vast. And so I think the issue is to get the science to catch up with them. We are seeing innovation on the digital health side, where there's endometriosis apps to manage some of these conditions, or to fill in the gaps where physicians aren't able to, don't have the time, don't have the knowledge.
Right.
But in terms of deep science, technology, drugs, I think are the highest hurdle.
Yeah.
But I'm going to preempt you. So Liz was incredibly organized. A week ahead, she sent us all these questions. And very unusually for me, I actually read them and wrote down answers. So which I normally don't do. But you also asked, where do you think there is an opportunity? Let me see. Where is an undervalued opportunity? And no pharma has said this to me, so this is purely my conjecture. But I think that many of them have data on men and women in their trials, in autoimmune, for example. The question is, are they powered? Maybe not, maybe, because they're pretty large trials. And now, is it worth their while? It's a bet.
Yeah.
Will they find something negative? Like when you looked at Leqembi, the Biogen SI drug, and you split it was almost no effect in women. Now, do they want to take that risk of shrinking their market, or will they find something great? So, easy for me to say. That's where I think there is an undervalued opportunity, but it's like opening Pandora's box, right? Will it be all angels or will it be evils? Don't know.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, and my answer to this was stolen a little bit by the McKinsey presentation earlier today, because they talked about how, and this is going back to my first answer, but primarily the investment to this point has been in reproductive and sexual health for women, but the stat that the McKinsey people shared was 47% of costs are related to conditions that affect women disproportionately. And I think that's where, that would be exactly what my answer is to where the opportunities are. And when we think about things that aren't maybe women-specific conditions, but maybe conditions that affect women disproportionately, migraines were brought up, autoimmune disorders, I'm blanking on some of the other ones now, but
Alzheimer's.
Alzheimer's, yeah, that's another great one. Mental health, anxiety, depression, some of those things. Those are areas where we are now getting the funding to see, and hopefully people are starting to realize that different conditions affect men and women differently, and as more data comes out about how it affects the women, there will just be so many more opportunities about how to target how it's affecting women differently than how it's affecting men, and creating devices or drugs or other solutions for women in those specific areas. That's 47% is a really large portion that has not been served at all.
Yeah.
And for just to expand on that, so two areas where there is mechanistic difference is Alzheimer's. The brain scans look different. If you have the ARPA-H gene, you have a faster decline if you're a woman. So there seem to be mechanistic differences in men and women. And the fact that Leqembi didn't work in women, it only worked a little bit in men, but didn't work. It suggests some differences. So that may be one area. And then cardiac, we know that it's large vessel disease in men and microvascular disease in women, and that's partly why they present differently in the ER, because one has huge vessels falling apart, and women have sort of little things happening all over, so it's diffuse. So there may be those, maybe if there are mechanistic differences, the hypothesis is that it's be easier to find different ways of treating them and finding differences.
Yeah, I mean, just to recap what you had said earlier today in your presentation, we define women's health as solely impacting women's health disproportionately and or differently. And to me, as a non-scientist, non-investor, I think a lot of focus has been put on the solely category, but there's a lot of money to be made, advances, cost savings to our healthcare system, if we started looking at those sex-based differences, at how it's different. That seems like a real
And
opportunity.
so I'm sorry, Liz, but I'd like to give you another example. So I was in pharma before the genomics revolution, and then there during part of it. And before genomics, pharma wanted to treat 80% to get 20% response rate. And I'm not putting pharma down. I'm saying that was that was what everybody was settling for, because we didn't know how to tell responders from non-responders. And then when genomics started coming in, the initial response was discomfort. Like, are you going to reduce my market to small numbers? And it turned out that yes, initially there was that fear, but these targets became so powerful and became so valuable, and one could really charge very high prices for this targeting. So then they adopted it. And I see it a little bit like that, where whenever the business model is about to change, you don't know whether it's going to work in your favor or disfavor. So there's some time when you are sort of hanging out, waiting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's really precision medicine, right? I
Yes.
mean, that's what it is.
And that's the thing, right? And so what do you do if it diminishes without augmenting it in dollars, or some making it up in some other way?
Yeah, exactly. All right. Let's talk about a great example of big ROI on a women's health investment that you have made. Why don't we start with you, Luke?
Yeah, sure. So we're fairly new investors in women's health. She's got a little bit more of a track record than we do, but we've done 3 women's health investments to this point. Our first, which we have exited, was Thomas Medical. We sold to MedGyn. It was a single-use women's health manufacturer. So they manufactured devices and accessories for women's health. And it was right just kind of at the beginning of this spur of you were ahead of the curve, it seems like, if you began your fund in 2013 doing this. I think we invested in that in 2018 and had a fairly quick exit because it really was right when the trajectory was going upward on women's health. The other ones that we're invested in and we still hold, actually we heard from Angela Dotson earlier today with Empress Medical.
Yeah.
That's one of our investments. And then we have another called Malia Medical, which is a hysteroscope, a single-use hysteroscope company. And we just really see opportunity. We'll talk a little bit more, I think, about how investors have migrated towards women's health. We're one of the type of investors that have been medical device and medical device service investors for a while, and have just in the last few years really seen the kind of the surge in women's health opportunities, mostly driven by a lot of the data that's starting to come out and the focus that's been put by the government on research. And some of these things, like I said, that we really need as investors to be able to convince those putting up the money that we're being responsible with potential outcomes. But Thomas Medical was a great investment. It was certainly successful for us, and we expect the other 2 in our portfolio to succeed as well.
That's great. Okay. I know you have a bunch of examples. But.
Yeah, so in 2018, I had an exit to Boston Scientific of Envision. That was about a 16x return. Wow. It doesn't compare with tech exits that are, 100x, but for our world, it's a pretty good exit.
Yeah.
And then 2 other exits, and one was a roll-up of fertility clinics, and that was a 3x-ish exit, a good IRR, and another one was women's group aesthetics, also in that category, service business. But we're looking at services, at drugs, at devices, at diagnostics, the whole gamut.
Okay. Yeah, because you guys are not in this for charity, right? You are taking people's money and investing it, so you have to do that in a way that you actually get that return. Right. So there's clearly money to be made here. Yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, we wouldn't have.
Wouldn't do it.
Yeah. No.
Exactly.
No one would give us money to invest if
it's the obvious. Yet I feel like we have to state that a few times.
Yeah.
But anyway, okay. So we've touched on this a little bit with the White House initiative on women's health research, the ARPA-H funding, 110 million. We've got Department of Defense funding, 500 million. The new requirement that women have to be in clinical trials that are where the DoD is funding those grants, that research. Sex as a biological variable now has to be included in DoD grant submissions. NSF has put dollars into discrimination around algorithms. First ever women's health focused RFP. So lots of changes happening in government. What do you think of that, first of all? Second of all, how is that really impacting you as investors and the climate in which you're working?
Yeah, so definitely seeing a change, I'll say that. We've seen a big surge of women's health-focused investors, meaning that's all they do. They're funds that are exclusively focused on women's health investing. Those didn't exist. I mean, I guess you existed 11 years ago. I was going to say 10 years ago.
But no, most of them are very new, and it's great.
It is great. You're seeing general investors, what we might call agnostic investors that will invest kind of in any industry, they see enough opportunity in women's health that they're actually starting to be willing to invest there as well. And then you have firms that are maybe more like us that are just general healthcare investors that have maybe a focus area in women's health investing because of all these changes. And on top of that, you're seeing healthcare organizations really start investing in institutes for women. I think I've seen Atrium Health, Brigham Mass General, Northwell have all recently invested in women's health institutes. I think it was Atrium that specifically did a cardiovascular and heart women's health institute. And so you're seeing these structural changes even at the hospital system levels where they're actually spending money and time specifically on women's health, and that will generate much better data, much better research, more clinical trials. We heard from Metrodora earlier today here in Utah that's focused on some of those complex chronic diseases in women. And so these are starting to pop up everywhere at large hospital systems and in some smaller, more clinic-type settings, but all of those are really good signs for future investment in women's health because, again, we'll just get more data, we'll get more information as the government continues to focus on it and push it. It makes our job easier to convince.
Well, and it de-risks a bit, right?
Absolutely.
If the government's putting 10 million in, then there's less you have to put in.
So thank you for bringing up Northwell as an example. They have a venture studio called Aegis, and their first two products were services, one for labor and delivery, and I'm blanking at this moment for what they are, but they were both in women's health, and they're looking to do to create more women's health companies that they will then test out in the Northwell system. Northwell is also working on an endometriosis test. They won't tell me anything about it, but they're working on that. UPMC, as they have said that they're interested in women's health, so the UPMC Venture Fund has made one investment in women's health. They invest in Electra Health for menopause, but they're actively looking for other investments. So the health systems are definitely coming into the fray, which is also very exciting.
Yes. I mean, it makes it a welcoming environment to try to bring that innovation into the marketplace. It makes it much easier.
It also means that it's needed.
And it's needed.
You know,
right. Again, they wouldn't do it, right?
Right.
Unless there was
they're
money
not
to be
going to
made.
do it if it weren't. So it really endorses it. And also everything that the administration has done to date has been very validating, because when I go out to limited partners and they say, well, you know, why is there nothing happening? Then I say, no, this and this and this has happened. And clearly there is consensus that this is important.
Yeah.
And I even think you're seeing it from the strategics, right? Medtronic has recently put out kind of a women's line of products and is putting more focus and investment there.
They had nothing in women's health forever.
Right.
Zero.
We just saw Laborie talk. Yeah. We had the Laborie discussion earlier when we had the 9 companies up here. They made an investment in the OB space.
Right. They acquired clinical innovations. Yeah.
And so you're starting to see even the big strategics. There kind of was always these smaller medical device companies that were focused on women's health in the last few years, but you're seeing the big strategics now pivot a little bit towards having their own divisions and making their own investments in the space.
Yeah, it's very exciting to see these changes. Okay. So we had a little election, and many are calling it a big red wave, right? So there'll be a huge shift. So the office of the Gender Policy Office, this White House initiative, those will all disappear. we don't know what's going to happen. He just actually nominated today RFK Jr.
RFK as
to be Secretary of HHS. So that'll be interesting. But so there's lots of changes happening. So, and a lot of folks are anxious. What does that mean for women's health if we don't have that White House anymore? So what is your, and not to say Trump won't do stuff on women's health. I'm just saying you won't have that initiative anymore. So I want to be clear on that. But what is your sense of looking out into 2025 and beyond? Do you think that we have now come to a point at which we can't go back? Like the climate, the ecosystem has changed enough? Or do you think there'll be steps back? Like what's your analysis of things as we go into 2025?
That's a good question. Do you want to go?
It's
first?
a tough one. I
I'm
admit.
happy to go.
I mean, I don't have a crystal ball.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think it'll be completely linear. I think what I'm hoping is that if the economy really, I think the economy has been better than people have thought, but that aside, if everybody believes the economy is great and people start doing IPOs and the stock market keeps appreciating, I think that will help women's health because there are several companies like Maven, like Tia, ready, all geared up to go public.
Yeah.
And those will be, it'll be helpful. And some other digital health companies too that want to go public. So I think it could be positive from that point of view. And then on the other hand, I fear that we've also learned that society really undervalues women in a way that is not totally comfortable for me. So I think it'll be, 1 foot forward and 1 foot back, and hopefully this is only now in the thick of all of this, and it'll equilibrate to a better position. But I've been upset by a lot of the rhetoric.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have a crystal ball. I wish I had a really clear answer on this. I think there's a few things you can talk about from a macro perspective if we just look at the economy. We know economists don't love the trade policy with the tariffs and some of those things. Some of the deportation talk could significantly harm the economy in the short term.
The lack of labor.
Yeah, and so we'll see if those things come to pass or if they don't. Now, on the flip side of that, we know he's going to want to keep taxes down. The tax code will be pro-business. With interest rates coming down, that's certainly good news for investing. I think more specifically to women's health, it's extremely hard to predict if some of these funding initiatives will continue or not. They're talking, very heavily about slashing just government spending in general.
Yes.
I certainly hope women's health and health in general is not one of the areas that they cut, but I don't know that we know enough at this point to say either way. Now, with all of that being said, I still see women's health as being an area that outpaces investment just in general. We've kind of seen that trend over the last few years, and I don't think that stops either way. The question is if the macro market of investing continues the lull that we've been in. In 2021, we just had a ton of investment flowing in, just record levels, and we've kind of gone downhill since then. That's normal. We usually have 6-year cycles where investing is really high and then it comes back down. And so if we're just following historical trends, I would expect investment to really go back up in the next 4 to 5 years. It is kind of a unique time, so I don't know that historical precedent is a great measure right now, but a lot of unknowns, certainly a lot of questions, and there's both sides to the coin. I don't know that I have a great answer on what to expect.
I mean, some of the things I worry about, I also don't know, and I have no inside knowledge at all. But I worry if the FDA comes under fire. I think they've been, for the most part, engaging more and more and being more open and being more collaborative in general. And I think that they've been thinking about women more constructively. If they come under pressure, they might retreat. So so that's unknown. Same for CMS, because a lot of women rely on Medicaid and also Medicare. So I don't know what CMS will also, what kind of pressure they'll come under. So it really depends on if there is pressure on these elements that are so important for making the ecosystem work.
Right. I will say this. So as a lobbyist, I'm in Washington, D.C. I'm working with Congress on a regular basis. I've not had a direct conversation with President Trump, but I have talked with many senators and representatives, and I have found, whether Democrat, Republican, most like to pick off certain diseases or conditions. So they'll be very passionate about Alzheimer's, and they will be interested, disproportionate impact on women, tell me more about that. Or cardiovascular disease. Like, most people do not know that stat, that when a woman is sent home after an ER admission for cardio-related condition, twice as likely to die than a man. Most people don't know that. When they hear that, that really raises their interest. So I think that there is hope for continuing women's health investment. It'll have to be in a fractionated way, though. I don't think the broad ARPA-H Sprint for Women's Health program, I think that's in trouble in the next, in 2025. I think that they will maybe keep it and might merge it with NCATS, which is another sort of platform innovation-focused entity within NIH. So there might be some consolidation, definitely cuts in spending. I don't think it'll die, but that type of thing. So what's really important is that the private sector steps up, or we've gotten to this point where we're not going to go back. And so the government may pull back on some funding, may just do specific diseases, conditions over here, but the investor side is still moving forward. That is what I hope will happen. But we don't
And
have
I think it also, I think some of what would happen in Europe will also have some influence. You know, I don't know with the MDR to MDD transition, what that will do. We were talking about it today as maybe making the US more important as the first stop. But again, if that is the case, then there will be more things coming in from the device side.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it's an interesting time. A lot of unknowns. I guess we'll see. But I do think women's health has made it in investing far enough that I agree. I think the private sector is ready to step up. The caveat to that is if markets are bad, if interest rates are high,
Right.
it gets really hard for investors to invest at the level that we would all love to. So there's that macro kind of shadow that hangs over everything.
But we've been promised a very rosy macro.
Yeah, and maybe we'll get that.
And if we get that, then
the private sector I think would be ready to step up. But I think women's health is at the forefront of an emerging market that we'd be very interested in investing in.
Well, I will say for the economy, the first 100 days of the Trump administration, that will be their big focus is the tax cuts, because so many of them expire.
Yep.
So yes, that should feed the investment community pretty early in 2025. So hopefully.
Liz, can I ask another question?
Yes.
So, I don't know what the DEI initiatives have. I don't know what the direct correlation has been to women's health, but they have brought women at least to the fore, and that is now very much out of favor. And I just wanted to highlight that as something that I don't know what it'll do. I think there could be indirect ways where women aren't recruited for big company boards, where certain policies or initiatives might be. So there might be other more subtle, more indirect effects. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, definitely a lot of those policies at the agency level will, I'm sure, disappear under the new administration, because that's definitely a key issue. I also think that language is very important. So when you talk about representation instead of diversity, equity, inclusion, when you talk about precision medicine instead of having to include women and people of color, it changes the tone. And so I just think we need to be careful about language going forward if we want to work together to advance this area. So we'll have to see and come up with ways to do it. So would love to ask people in the audience, get your questions ready. I'm going to be asking you in a moment here to step up and ask your questions. I would love to ask you both your advice for other investors. And I would like you to picture the investor who is not in women's health, who's maybe they're here today, they've heard the buzz, they're now a little bit interested. What advice do you have to them? What would you like to say to them to get them to start investing in women's health?
Honestly, I'd start with showing them that McKinsey presentation and just show all of the opportunity that exists out there. If you want an exit and you look at the opportunity that exists, she showed the assets in the pipeline relative to the market size. It's way underfunded. The part of the problem is there's also less innovation happening, so there's less opportunities to invest there. You really just need to look at the data and start understanding how underrepresented women's health really is in investment. And part of that problem is that a lot of women's health companies are founded by women or run by women, and for whatever reason, the investing community is really bad at investing in women.
There are few women investors.
Are in the investor community,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think I read a statistic, it's a little dated now, but it was in 2020, 90% of the decisions made by investors were made by men.
90%?
90%. And again, that might be a little bit dated. It might be a little better now, but that was 2020. It was only 4 years ago.
Yep.
And I read another statistic that investing in women actually returns $2 to every $1 of investing in men founders. And so I think we just need to, there's just kind of a data discussion that needs to be had.
Yeah.
There's really good data out there that says not only investing in women's healthcare is a great opportunity, but investing in women themselves is a great opportunity, and we just need to be better about doing it.
So my experience is, I've been saying that and showing the data, but I think there's a point in your brain where data and bias collide.
Absolutely.
and I think it just becomes, and I think also, I think women are just as likely to invest in things that they understand and are an issue for them or people they know as men are.
Sure.
So I don't think it is, I think it's completely understandable that men may not understand women's problems, because I don't know that women are a priori better at understanding men's problems. I think we just need to have both so that we get all the population covered. But that also is easy to say, but hard to implement.
Yeah.
But I think this is an area where data has been a real stumbling block for me. I've shown a lot of these data to limited partners, to LPs, and they kind of go,
It's not enough for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think you bring up an interesting point about, so I have a 2-year-old daughter, I have another daughter on the way, and I knew we talk about a lot of these things that we've heard about in the women's track today about, some of the things women deal with after pregnancy, and all those things were so foreign to me, and now I kind of understand them because I've just seen my wife go through a lot of them. But to your point exactly, if men are making decisions on investing in women's health, they completely don't understand the problem, and
I wouldn't expect them.
And it's not all our fault. We're not trying to be uninformed, right? But yeah, there's a level of information that just needs to be communicated, and just a level of understanding that needs to be met before they do understand that it's a real problem and there are real potential solutions, and it's worth investing in. And so that's a great point. There's just a level of misunderstanding or just not even being exposed to it that needs to be overcome. It's maybe an extra hurdle that women's health investing has versus other medical areas.
All right, so we have questions out there. You're welcome to stand up at the microphone. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I have a question. Both of you shared a few stories of successful exits that you've had in your companies that you've invested in. Are there any, on the flip side, are there any stories that you might have of women's health companies that haven't done so well? If there's any pitfalls that those of us building companies could potentially avoid in this space?
I certainly have failures, but I don't know that I would pinpoint the failure to the fact that they were women's health related. I think that the failure was more generic and not women's health. At least that's how I perceive it.
I completely agree. It hasn't been anything specific to women's health, but for the example, I'll give an example of one that we still believe in, but has had some maybe some unexpected hurdles that we didn't foresee. But I think one of the key things in medical device in general is just speed to market, getting your product out. So we have an investment that we've had delayed multiple times for some engineering issues, just haven't been able to solve the problem the way that we wanted to. And in that span, 2 other devices in the same area have come out. That really hurts your exit opportunity, right? And you have to pivot a little bit and maybe find ways to differentiate yourselves from them instead of beating them to the market. And so that's one of the ones in a women's health specific company that I've seen. But again, to your point, it's not necessarily women's health specific, it's just a common pitfall of a medical device investment. People see a hot spot, a bunch of people are trying to get to market first. Oftentimes the first to market kind of wins, or at least gets the big exit. Whether or not it wins long term is a different story, but certainly something we've seen in women's health and in many of our investments is just...
But I will just say an adjacent answer. There are, I think in drug development, if you're looking at, say, endometriosis, the risk is higher. It's not that much higher if you're looking at pain, so it's symptom relief. Even that is hard because pain is so subjective and it's difficult. But if you're looking at disease modifying to change the disease, I think it is objectively more risky than if you took another disease with the same incidence, the same number of, same market potential, because the animal models, for example, aren't there, because the regulatory path hasn't been honed. So I think in drug development, I see some areas, because of the dearth of precedent, because the dearth of research, and these animal models have been honed over decades in most other diseases. And for endometriosis, there isn't a great animal model, so that's an issue. In endometriosis, the disease burden is not one-to-one correlated with the pain. Some people can have a lot of pain and very little disease. So the FDA, understandably, thinking about the patient, has pain as an endpoint, and disease modification is not yet honed as an endpoint. So there are those kinds of risks. I can't say that they were in my portfolio and I've suffered from them, but I can imagine that they could be unless we make progress.
Oh. Yes.
I have a quick question. So I want to understand the investor's perspective on investing in women's health. So 50% of the world population, if you just see the probability, are women. If you are trying to make a difference in healthcare and make money for sure, there's a big market. 50% is enough market to make money. Say, for example, if you are developing a test for women, like gynecology, or in our case, we are developing test for breast cancer detection. We have a huge market. Even if we are developing a test which is widely, or drug, which is widely used for anybody, like men or women, if we don't do enough clinical trial on women population, if the drug doesn't work, like Anula was talking about, one drug was withdrawn. This is a loss of investment, because if you don't do enough clinical trial using women population, it's not going to work. So why not to invest early enough in all health, men and women, so that there is a big return on investment for any health care, whether it's diagnosis or drug, and also take care of the women's health, because we are taking care of 50% of our population. So where is dilemma for investor? Why don't they pay attention where there is a need for serving 50% of population? Is the market not big enough when you are serving 50% of population?
So I think the expectation is that if you have a large number, that results in a large number of dollars. But that is not actually true.
Yes.
Because it depends on how much you charge per person. So if you are charging $3 million per person for a gene therapy, right, then you have to treat very few people
Yeah.
to get to the same revenue number. And that is the problem. The problem is that a lot of women's health are common chronic diseases that have not gone up to the high-paying targeted therapies like the checkpoint inhibitors or the immuno-oncology, all of those, or the rare diseases. So the issue is that, yes, up till about the 1990s, until the genomics revolution, the pharma's bread and butter were common chronic diseases and treating as many patients as possible. And now the focus is treating a smaller number of patients, but at a higher price point, and that's the problem.
Yeah, to add to that, I think one of the problems is it's easy to think that investors have an unlimited amount of money to invest. I know that there are really large sums that you see invested, but that's every investment that's made, there's an opportunity cost associated with it. Meaning if we invest in this, we can't invest in this, and this. And that's what our limited partners or those that fund us expect us to look at is what is the best investment. And so oftentimes investors are pushing companies, whether they're right or wrong, oftentimes investors are pushing companies to get to the solution that's the fastest that will return the largest amount of money. And I'm not saying that that's right. I'm not saying that that's best for women's health. I'm just saying that oftentimes is what is driving.
I mean, let's get out of healthcare. If you're looking at crypto and AI right now, you might say, why do healthcare at all right now? So that opportunity cost is you have a fixed amount of money and you have to decide where to put it. And what your strategy. If your strategy is to get the largest return, you'll make a bit different decisions than if your strategy is to have an impact. And most limited partners, they're managing pension funds. They have to, they need to give retirement money to the people who invested in their funds. So their fiduciary duty is to give the biggest return.
And one more comment is that I think a lot of the issue has been to this point is that we just didn't even totally understand that, especially in drug development, and this is not my area of expertise, so correct me if I say something that I shouldn't, but to this point, I don't think we've totally understood that well that maybe these drugs would react differently in men than women. I think we're just kind of starting to really understand.
We have data on all the side effect profile. I don't think you were here this morning, but there is a...
But how recent is that data, I guess?
No, I mean, the data has been around for a while, but it's only been analyzed lately.
Lately, yeah. So I think we're starting to come to that realization that when we do test these drugs, we need to test it in men and women separately, and we need to understand how the profile happens. But to that point that it hasn't been analyzed till recently, we've frankly just didn't even know that it needed to be done.
It's just more nuanced.
Yeah.
And I go back, I said this morning, climate tech wasn't anything 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's become a thing.
Yep.
And it took a lot of persuasion to get people to pay attention.
Yeah.
Just a twist on that, and then we're out of time. Adverse drug events are twice as common in women in
3x.
Every category except for one, death. Men actually die more often than women. And women live longer than men. So men have a much to gain from this precision type medicine work, right? Because the more we understand how drugs, devices, what have you, are working in the female body versus the male body, what learnings could we then apply so men could live longer, so that we have better...
Absolutely. And I think
it's like a win-win all around.
I think we are just trying to level bring women up. We are not trying to keep it up and up and up. I think we want to treat everybody and invest in everybody. As a physician, absolutely. Everybody is a meritorious patient as far as I'm concerned. I'm just trying to level this gap.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much. This was wonderful. This concludes the Women's Health Track and brings a close to the 2024 Mayor Brown Life Sciences Summit.